When it comes to Prime Video's On Call, in some ways it can feel very much like it's not going on the same trend we often feel happens with cop shows, and while that does require a bit of an adjustment period, it ultimately makes for a quality binge watch. So to summarize the first season, Tracy Harmon has been a patrolwoman in Long Beach, California for years, I think a little bit more than a decade. And over the course of that decade, she has trained many rookies, and the latest one is Alex Diaz. Alex comes during a rather challenging time in Harmon's life, since her personal life's not in the best place, and also a recent tragedy has really shaken her and has made her a little bit rattled to the point of not sticking to the book as she usually does. But over the course of 60 days, which the first season takes up, we watch as Alex learns the ropes, the difference between soft power and hard power, especially as a cop, the different politics of the Long Beach PD, and whether Harmon is everything everyone says about her or not. So getting to the review section, the first highlight for us is definitely how it handles being a half-hour drama, because with the shift that the streaming era has caused, half-hour dramas are finally learning that they can be 30 minutes or less and still tell a compelling story. And while not all of them do this well, as we've covered in past shows, when it comes to how On Call does it, it usually hits the nail on the head without having to have every single episode in some type of cliffhanger to keep you wanting to come back. Instead, over the 8 episodes, it spreads out throughout them, developing each character, well, the lead characters anyway, developing the lead story, and giving you enough calls per each episode that feel like it's less of pull from the headlines, the biggest stories you can think of, and more stuff that you can imagine a patrol cop actually handling. And with that, you get a wonderful combination of building characters up little by little, storylines that feel ultimately like they can fit within a 60-day period, and it makes it so in terms of binge watching, whether you're the type who actually does watch an entire season in one sitting or you like to do them in batches, both ways can work easily for you. The next highlight for us is definitely how this show balances realism but also gives you entertainment. Now, when it comes to cop shows, admittedly, we haven't really watched a huge amount of them just because they're hard for me to get into. The last one that I really committed to was 911, and I think after season 7, when it moved over to ABC, I pretty much dropped it because I couldn't take it anymore. But when it comes to On Call, it kind of renews my interest in the cop show because it doesn't go for that all-out feeling of, having characters swinging from buildings that have toppled over and are now leaning on buildings across the street or stuff like that. Instead, what you're given is something that, strangely, is not trying to be overly pro-cop. It is not trying to present a sense of realness that feels almost like an imitation. Instead, it wants to feel very much rooted in some kind of logic. And with that, you get something that does carry some kind of scrutiny towards cops, but at the same time, it shows you cops who actually deserve the empathy because how difficult their jobs can be. And this balance is strangely not something, even for a first season, that teeter-totters, but considering the creators of this show and the writers have been doing cop shows forever, it seems like this wasn't just the latest thing so they can make a new franchise and get an additional paycheck, but they really wanted to challenge themselves into making something that might be rooted in the familiar, but at the same time going to feel like something new. Perhaps one of the best examples of it going to the next highlight is how hard power and soft power are shown. In the story, while Harmon is generally someone who leans towards soft power, when it comes to Sergeant Lasman, he's someone that tends to want to use hard power more. After all, just having a presence of a cop who, runs things, for lack of a better way to put it, it allows us some protection so he doesn't have to worry about somebody trying him, maybe pulling out a gun or knife or really trying to cuss him out while he's trying to do his job. But you can see when each type of power is useful. In terms of hard power, it's very useful considering what Lasman has been through, where he grew up around drug dealers, people who would kill kids and all this other stuff when he hit his part of Long Beach. So having that type of power allows for some level of respect so that when people see you, as said, stuff shuts down. You don't have to necessarily raise your voice, don't have to necessarily get into an incident, considering how everybody has a cell phone and can potentially record you. But as shown, it never treated as something that's kind of naive. There's also the way that Harmon does it, where even if people don't become confidential informants, she has people she knows in the gangs who want peace as much as she does. And granted, they want peace so they can do their business more discreetly, but then be able to operate discreetly means more safety for the public. So it's one of those trade-offs. And the same could even be said when it comes to her relationship with the homeless. Yes, a lot of the public don't necessarily like the homeless and the camps they build up because they have fears of safety, drug use, and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, through both sides, you see the role cops play as middlemen between almost any type of population you could think of. They could either be the person who's there to enforce safety and protection, or they can possibly be the middleman in terms of making mediation between different populations who have different needs or even different issues that cannot be easily solved. Which leads to the last highlight in that for us is just the lack of external politics. While there is a lieutenant who showed on the show, that person, Lieutenant Bishop, is not someone who's in every episode hammering on Harmon, Sergeant Lasman, or anything like that. Their role is treated like it should be in terms of they have so much bigger fish to fry than what a patrol person is doing. Never mind a sergeant who has been doing, probably working on the force as long as them, if not longer. And even in terms of like when something happens at the beginning of the season and that causes a big stir and sets off the whole season storyline, you don't see the mayor get involved. You don't see congressional people, the governor, yada yada. You don't see a lot of outside forces suddenly come in and in some ways undermine what Harmon's doing, especially when it comes to training Alex. And because the show allows a sort of bubble around them, it makes it so that Harmon, being a 10 or maybe even 12-year person who's been working on the force, you have to respect her. You see her experience, her knowledge, and that she isn't just someone who basically memorized the book, but she understands the book in and out, and also the stuff that's not mentioned in the book because either A, nobody has decided to update it, or B, because what's theory and what's practicum is very different. And with that, it just furthers how much this show pushes to be logical rather than pursue the ways that we often see with cop shows that have become, quite honestly, dull. But with that said, no show is perfect, and this is a new show, so of course there are some things that we're a bit on the fence about. The first thing is that there is a really high fence when it comes to the characters' personal lives, and while the fence does have openings so you can see and to learn about Alex, Lasman, and Harmon, at the same time there's still a certain level of separation that's put in place. Like, for example, this entire season, you will rarely see any of those characters in civilian clothing. Never mind, I don't think you really get to see them off the clock. So with that, you don't get to see Harmon's home. You don't get to see Alex's house. You don't really get to see their personal life too much. Yes, you do get introduced into Alex's family by him having to go see his mom while he's working, a video call with his brother, and when it comes to Harmon, we do see her sister after one of the people in the homeless camps kind of hinted that, hey, your sister's around. But in terms of us really getting some type of follow-up so that we see Alex having dinner with his mom and seeing what their relationship is like, or even in the case of Harmon, since she's divorced, we don't really get to see what her home is like. Maybe pictures down, maybe seeing places where there used to be frames, but they're no longer there. You don't get all that. And with that, if you're somebody who wants to feel especially close to lead characters, this could potentially be a problem for you. But at the same time, when you think about it, again, this show seems to be very much about logic. And when you think about it, over the course of 60 days, Alex is a rookie. Brand to the force, he was in a class of 3 people and he was second in his class. So it's not like he's this brilliant, great guy. And at the same time, Harmon is not some mama bear type of cop. So with that combination, why in the world would she be divulging all of her business to this rookie? And at the same time, Alex has a few secrets of his own, and he's been told many rumors about Harmon in terms of how she operates. So why would he divulge all his secrets and all his business to somebody who, based off of what Lasman and others say, could potentially stab him in the back? But with that said, it's not just the issue with the lead characters, but also in some ways the supporting characters feeling a little bit too distant. Like, there's one cop that Alex bonds with who I believe is a rookie, or maybe just a little bit past where he is in his career, and this seems to be one of his best friends on the force, and things happen to this person that is quite dramatic and definitely traumatic for the character. But I can't tell you what that person's name is. I know what they look like. I know that he definitely presents the idea when it comes to that character. Lasman is a sort of kinfolk kind of thing going on, which kind of adds on to the politics of it, never mind the boys club. But as for who that person is, what his name is, I'm drawing a blank. And even when it comes to other characters, most characters pretty much operate around whose orbit are they in. Are they around Alex's orbit, Harmon's orbit, or Lasman's orbit? And while technically Lieutenant Bishop kind of doesn't exist in that sense, but you can also say, or rather submit, that while she is an individual, has her own storyline going on, for the most part, she is treated as somebody's boss. And at times, the potential reason why for 12 years, Harmon has been stuck in the same position, even though she has aspirations to be something better and bigger. Which leads to the last on the fence topic, and that's just the season ending where it began. And that's a problem for me, since when it comes to watching anything, I'm very much about, I want character development, so I have a reason to get attached to these characters and care when they're in life or death situations, or when they get their heart broke, or whatever the case is. But at the same time, I also want story progression so I can see some type of evolution, development beyond things happening to them. You know, there's a greater world outside this character that I want to see get built up. But as much as you recognize with everything that they did this season, they had to get some kind of punishment, at the same time, it feels like all this stuff happened to them. They learn more, gain more experience, and then to be right back where they started, it feels like, I wouldn't say that everything we've seen and what happened was for naught, but it feels like they put the emergency brakes on, and it kind of messes with you a little bit to the point where it could cause frustration. But overall, when it comes to On Call, it definitely feels like a different kind of cop show than at least what I'm used to. For it, does it require some adjustment? Absolutely. But even with some of the things you have to adjust about, especially because his characters aren't as personable as you may like, it still has this feeling that it's not trying to put cops and first responders on this pedestal, but at the same time, it's not trying to damn them either. It wants you to see their humanity, see the challenges of their job, but also recognize in their humanity they have flaws, that they're imperfect, and sometimes they're just plain old buttheads.